Welcome to Journey to Joy Live. I'm Dr. Joy, and I have an awesome guest here, Christopher Hughbanks. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christopher Hughbanks. I'm a college instructor and administrator. I also do community work around healing from oppression, and I'm excited to be here, Dr. Enjoy.
It is
And
so nice to have you here. So I know Chris from way back when I was at the
right,
University of Michigan.
go
I
blue.
was, yeah, go blue. I was a first year coming in, and you were a second year sophomore, and you were our buddy, right? Is that what we called it?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were there for orientation week, and you were just so helpful and amazing. And you were my friend throughout college and obviously after college. So,
Exactly. 20 years later.
oh my gosh, has it been really 20 years? When did I graduate? 2005. Oh, well, almost 20 years.
Since you
Yeah,
started, for sure.
right. And you've stayed within colleges, right? So after U of M, you went to Maryland, right?
Massachusetts.
Oh, Massachusetts. That's an
Yep.
in-state. So when you mean oppression, what exactly do you do with the students?
By oppression, we talk about like systemic policies, cultural practices that
Mm.
impact particular groups of people. We want students
Mhm.
to be aware and thoughtful about their identities, actually to talk and reflect about them, since a lot of that is connected to how you build relationships. And one of the keys to being successful in college is feeling connected to community. And so we want folks to stay
Mhm.
and get connected, deepen relationships. And so working on oppression and noticing kind of where you've been impacted by different forms of oppression is a useful strategy in maintaining student success and retention, things like that.
That is absolutely perfect. Because when thinking about the developmental phases, like when you are in high school and getting into college and throughout college, you're really trying to figure out your identity, who you are, what you want to do, what your gender is, what you're attracted to, and all kinds of things. And
All things.
speaking of that, October is LGBT History Month. So I definitely wanted to tie in the LGBT issues as well as how that ties into mental health and oppression. So, what do you think the unique mental health challenges for individuals of the LGBT plus community, what they face, and whether it's because of stigma, discrimination? What do you say about that?
I think it does start with stigma. I think that our culture is very shaming
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ plus identities, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and our society feels very centered around being heterosexual. You're supposed
Mm-hmm.
to look and act in a particular way so that people perceive you as heterosexual. Oftentimes, people are assumed to have heterosexual partnerships or be in heterosexual relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a pervasive invisibility that I think is
Mm.
connected to that shame, that
Mm-hmm.
we don't talk about these things. A lot of folks grew up in communities where people didn't ask them who they were attracted to, ask them about their crushes, ask them about their relationships and partnerships. I have friends of mine that have been partnered for over 20 years, and their families know very little about their partners and
Oh,
their relationships.
yes, for sure.
And so that's really, I think that plays a toll on one's mental health and has a big emotional impact when that part of yourself you feel like you have to keep a secret, or you can't
Mm-hmm.
fully, even if you aren't keeping it a secret, even if it's not being visible, if it's not being recognized,
Mm-hmm.
still in some ways are limited, and it can play a role in how somebody expresses themselves, um,
Yeah.
day to day, things like that.
Yeah, because you mentioned society, and society probably looks at like whiteness, being a male, Christian, heterosexual, like you said, like those are the norm. But obviously, that's
Right.
not the norm. There's so many varieties out there. So we really need to promote and talk about LGBT issues. I know I have a lot of LGBT plus patients, and their patients, right? Because they're obviously going through a lot of issues, depression and different things like that. And so it's definitely important to promote that. And, when you think about societies, I love how the restrooms are starting to change, right? So that might make someone feel really stigmatized when they're like, I don't want to use the female bathroom. I don't want to use the male bathroom. But when it says all gender, it's like, ooh, yay, that includes me. So yeah.
Right.
Did
And
you
I
go
think we're
ahead?
starting to get better visibility around
Mm-hmm.
some of those things,
Mm-hmm.
and some better language around like gender and sexuality and how those things are different, how those things are connected and related. So that's very helpful, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think young folks in the schools have really been at the forefront of that and making sure that they feel included. Like pronoun stuff. When I was in school, we never did anything like that. Say our pronouns. And now when I meet young
Mm.
students now, that's the first thing they say when they introduce them to me. They say, my name is so-and-so, and they just say their pronouns. They don't even say my pronouns are. They
Oh.
just say so-and-so, he, they, she, whatever it is. I think it's a part of that is really making it known that you shouldn't assume those things. And so I feel like that's a really good, positive, like forward step.
That is good because it started out with those who identify as a gender that's not what they look like. Like they're the ones that have to say their pronouns. But then now people who are obviously still cisgender, they are saying their pronouns, like at the end of their emails and things like that. At first, I was like, well, wait, why? But then that makes sense. Yeah, because then it makes everyone else feel comfortable who are transgender to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it helps everyone realize that that everyone has pronouns, and like everyone should be thinking about them. And I think that helps people actually decide, like, are those pronouns that I've always used, do they work for me? Am I comfortable with that? Or have I just been using them just because it was convenient or because that's how I grew up? I think it just helps people examine those things, and it creates more, like you said, spaces that work for all people.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Chris, did you want to talk about your personal journey, professionally or personally, as far as the LGBT community?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it in higher education, which I think has been in some ways a blessing, just because there has been always folks constantly thinking about and putting these types of issues in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On college campuses. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
participated in activism around it. I've seen bathroom signage shift and change. I've been a part of groups that have changed. One of the first things we did when I was an advisor at the University of Michigan
Yeah.
in the Residence Halls Association, which is like the student government for people living in the halls, is they decided to designate one of the community restrooms as a gender neutral
Oh,
restroom.
really? Was that after I
Yes.
left?
That was after you left, yeah, because I was working
Oh,
there professionally, exactly. And
nice.
so it was in the basement of one of the residence halls, and they just said it was gender inclusive during meetings. And so during meetings, students use the bathroom as they um use that bathroom, and any gender person could go into that room. So it became a
That's
trans
great.
plus inclusive space just because students decided that. And even though they
Mm.
didn't have necessarily jurisdiction, it was an action they took that then brought up conversations about, we need to have designated restrooms that are gender inclusive. So I think that's been a great part of my professional journey, is being able to connect and support students in that way. And give them resources and help get them to university administrators that are making those decisions to be thoughtful. Because sometimes, like, it's been, like I said, 20 years
Yeah,
since over 20 years since I moved in as a freshman to
exactly.
college. And even still that I work at a college, sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. I'm thinking, like, I'm current, I'm with it. I understand so many
Oh, my things have changed.
they have, especially around like social media and access to resources and information. Like, people can go on a TikTok. You can learn a lot from just sitting on TikTok.
Mm.
And you can get connected to community. Like residents already know their roommates before they even get here. They've already been on
Oh,
their pages.
wow.
They've been on their pages. They've met their families. They've
That's
talked. They
true, because Facebook didn't exist when I was starting out.
right, exactly. So it's so different, and I have to
Wow.
stay connected to the audience who's impacted by some of these decisions. So I think that that's a really important piece for anyone who's like thinking about how to better support,
Mhm.
from a clinician standpoint, like from a therapy standpoint.
Yeah,
We want to get connected to
yeah,
LGBT communities and
good.
get a chance to learn and understand how they are impacted. What's it like? What's life like for you in your
Exactly.
LGBTQ plus identity, so that you have that kind of context when you're thinking about treatment, when you're thinking about
Yeah,
therapy, thinking about how to help someone work on the emotional impact, because it is an emotional impact to living as a queer person in a society that is very heteronormative.
exactly. Now, how do people know to come see you? Do they do you go and see everybody, or they have to make an appointment? They learn about you?
So in that way, around kind of the healing work pieces,
Mhm.
I there's lots of different like community spaces that they might find themselves in that find their way to me. A lot of it is listening to people and offering resources
Oh.
that way.
Mhm.
Of course, on campus we set up our Pride Center is really great about having
Mm.
spaces for people to meet faculty and staff, for people to get connected. So there's ways to get our name spread around. And then we have some great resources in our counseling center. Specific
Okay.
folks have training to support LGBTQ plus students. We also have at Oregon State a residential learning floor
Mm.
for LGBTQ plus folks. So you can live on that floor. That floor has all gender inclusive restrooms. It has a programming budget, but also even if you're not on the floor, you can live in that building. Like if you're not out or ready to come out, you can be adjacent in the
Mhm.
building and still be connected and get access to resources there as well.
Gotcha. That's good. Well, we probably answered this question because I was going to ask about how you felt access to mental health care play in addressing the mental health needs of LGBT plus
It's
individuals.
absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And it is very critical for any type of therapist, clinician to get training, seek out training, talk to your organizations, folks who are leading kind of training and professional development, to bring in
Hmm.
consultants, speakers, anybody to give you unique situations. Like let's just talk about like one's own healthcare, going to the
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, somebody someone can need an information about healthcare based on having a uterus. But you can't just
Mm.
because someone looks a certain way that they have or don't have a
They
uterus,
may
right?
not have a uterus.
Exactly. So you might want to get
But that's
better
why it's
clarity
good to
around
ask them
gender.
in the beginning, like, what are your
Precisely.
pronouns, you know? But you
Right,
know what? With
exactly.
that said, is there any, of course, there's an inappropriate way to ask, but what's the appropriate way to ask for us providers as far as
Exactly
like
like
whether
that.
they have a uterus or not? Huh?
Exactly. What are your pronouns? Do you have a uterus?
You should ask that directly. Do you
Yes.
have a uterus? Do
If
you have
you
a
are
penis?
if there are certain things or conditions or things that you're concerned about that involve that, you need to check with somebody and
Especially the
see.
primary care docs, because I know I don't
Absolutely.
ask every patient, but I know I should. Usually it's in the chart already because the therapist have asked that. So I might know from that. I might know what their name is that they would prefer to go by. But Chris 180, I really applaud because they do a great job. Pride Week, Pride Day, Pride Month, just all of the Pride stuff and resources. So it's really good at doing that. So I appreciate
And asking about what's been challenging,
it. Yeah.
right? And figuring out how to get to the roots to some of the traumas that people have experienced and having a queer identity
Hmm.
is very critical, because there are relationship pieces, There's some, and it sits on everyone in unique ways. Some people have a really good, have had to develop a lot of resilient skills because they have been on their own, or they have been afraid of being abandoned or
Mm,
mistreated. So they have created, I mean, a whole identity around making sure they are safe and secure. So they might look very put together. They might
yeah,
look very resilient and sound, but have built protective structures around those traumas. And it might be a therapist's job to help them look there and not be alone and facing some of those early pieces, because they've set their life up so that they can kind of avoid it. Um,
right.
but then that comes with stressors, that comes with other physical tolls on the body when you have constantly had to suppress these oppressive heteronormative standards that say you are not as important as other people, you are
Yeah,
disgusting, you are, not as good. We need to be able to have honest conversations, and folks need to be able to have attention for that, and attention for lots of things, like how queer folks are in relationships, their families, how they
mm,
have sex. Like, these
mm-hmm.
can become taboos, and people are like, I don't know if I should talk about that. Like, that's a training class. You need to get into a space where you can,
Hmm,
as a ally,
that's
talk about
great.
when you're nervous. Like, I don't want to have to answer this question, I don't want to talk about this, or I would be nervous if this came up, so that you have a space to actually
Ah, I
process
love
that.
it. We can bring those kind of
Right,
trainings to Chris 180.
exactly.
Yeah. Because
You
that's
can
what I was going to ask. Like, how can allies, you support? Yeah, that's
Some
good.
people, they don't want to say the wrong thing, and so they might not want to ask, like, what are your pronouns? They might think that
But
that's
we should ask.
offensive, but you should ask.
It's the
Exactly.
same way all through September. We've been talking about suicide prevention, and that's what I've been saying. Ask the question. Ask, are you suicidal? And people are like,
Yes,
but they appreciate that. And people in the LGBTQ plus community, they appreciate that as well. That's, you want to ask,
absolutely.
and it shows that you are recognizing that there's obviously that issue going on. And I know I meet when I meet teenagers who tell me they're transgender and this is their preferred pronouns, this is their preferred name, but then their parents don't know. So then I have to use certain pronouns in front of the parent and then certain pronouns to them. And so I don't, obviously for confidential reasons, I don't tell like the parents like, oh, this is what's going on, but I do try to encourage them for their mental health. Like, what's a good time when you feel comfortable talking with your parent about it? Because that
Exactly.
involves family therapy. That involves a lot to bring the family into it.
Yes, and that could be, and even by asking that question, lets you know and sends a message to that person that you care about them having a family. You care and you want them to stay connected, and you then get to assess what the relationship is like and how you can have a treatment plan that helps them move forward, that would involve their family if you're assessing that that's a good idea, or that would
Yeah.
involve getting connected to other resources that will support them in the same ways that families are built to do that. So it's important to be able to put yourself out there and ask those questions and let people know that I'm interested in you. I
Yeah.
want to know about you. I appreciate you. I like you and
Oh.
who you are and who you've decided to become. All these things all of that validation is just so absolutely critical.
And I love it's everywhere. Like it's probably not everywhere, but in the media. So The Best Man, the series. Did you watch that, right?
I did, yes.
I love that insert because I had a lot of, well, let me say what I'm talking about. The fact that they had a transgender
And
male,
non-binary character.
male.
Yeah,
Oh, he was
yeah.
non-binary, right?
Yeah, they were they
Or
and they used exactly.
they were
See?
non-binary. Exactly. So they were non-binary. So that was just really great because oh my gosh, all the issues that come from it's just so sad. And that's all those things made me cry. But anyway, but how the dad was so oppressive to him.
Yeah, and unawarely, I mean, this is a spoiler for anyone who's watching this and hasn't
Hey,
seen
they should have
it.
watched it by now. Please spoil it.
Exactly. But I think that the dad was very much unaware at the level of emotional impact it was having on their child. And so that was a big wake-up call for them to be like, hey, I'm a parent first. I don't understand some of these things, but these
Yeah.
things are really impacting my child. My child is thinking about not living anymore,
Yes. It's like, do
and
you want them to live or you want them to be
Right.
pigeonholed into what you think they should be?
What you think they should become. And questions like, because as a parent, you're always thinking like, how do I set my child up for success? And you are always in that mode that sometimes you can forget that it's like, check in with your child and what is the balance of giving someone some freedom and independence, but also challenging them and connecting with them and helping them know what it's going to be like being this is a society that is very binary. So if you are non-binary, that's great, and here are some challenges you may face, and here are ways that I will support you and back you, but to not also just naively send somebody out into a world that hasn't been structured for them. There are
Yeah, kicking them
ways
out.
that you have to help them out.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes folks get left hanging and they have to figure out all those things on their own, and they develop all these protective mechanisms and patterns of behavior as a result of that. That's connected to mental health that we have to understand, that therapists and mental health providers have to understand that people have a story there and they've had to figure out how to survive. And a simple question like, why do you want to wear that? Or this is better on you, or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, that was
Huge
hurtful.
impact, right? On someone
Yeah.
really feeling like themselves rather than actually exploring that with them.
Yeah, and some
Or
parents put
affirming
their
those ways.
kids out. Empire, he threw his son in the trash when he was little
Yes.
because he put on some shoes.
Like
And if that's
that
happening in the media, it's happening in real life.
for
So
real. And look at like
so sad.
what kind of emotional impact would that have if that happened to you as a child, right?
Right. And let's talk about so we kind of mentioned that, but being black and being in the LGBTQ plus community, what kinds of things have you learned from that? Both
Well, it's just
double
like
oppression.
exactly, just like when we talk about this is a pervasively heteronormative culture, it is
Hmm.
also pervasively a white culture. And
Yep.
so there's that piece too. There's so much I can go on and on and on because I've had a more develop what do I want to say conscious black identity from such a young age,
That's true.
living
I
in
remember
Detroit.
conversations that you and I have had
Yes.
in college because you wanted me to be mad about it. I'm like, well, I know, Chris, I know this oppression exists, but I don't want to walk around mad. They talk about the angry
Well,
black person.
exactly. And that's a piece of it, right? The anger piece is like, so where can you actually show your feelings about how you're being treated? And so many times in our culture, black folks are they're disrespected and asked to be happy about it. Like the most stark example I can share with you
Mm.
is, do you remember the mass shooting in South Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
Church, like
Mm.
literally, like hours after those folks had lost their family, they were expected to do news interviews where they like
No.
were forgiving this person and they did a church
Mm.
service. Like this all came out on the media where it's like you're expected to just push these things aside and take the high road. And because in a society, or white centered societies, there is no room for you to be upset as a black person, and so part of the ways that I feel like mental health is connected to these issues is being able to create spaces where black people can fully express the range of emotions one has. We're not always happy, we're not always sad, we're
Right.
sometimes upset, we're sometimes tired. We need to have all of the feelings.
And that's the answer to the question, why are all the black people sitting together at the table in the lunch? You know what people
Okay,
talking about.
so you want to be with somebody who's not, and I've had that happen several times where I've been at work and somebody was like, wow, so and so was so upset or so mean. And I was looking like, actually, I don't think I read it that same way,
Yeah, the
because
microaggressions. Yeah.
yeah, and it could be another person who's black, but it also could be someone who isn't black. Just because I grew up in an expressive family, we are very, very animated about stuff, and we show that. And that was
Yeah, I
literally
know
in
I
my
am.
house, and I saw my family transform when they went out to like go shopping. I remember this starkly, like how my dad was when he got
Mm.
pulled over the police. He was like, "Yes, officer." He just became this whole different person. And he's such
Mm.
a funny person. He's such a jokester. He's
Mhm.
such a like expressive person. Watching him shift to this like really like stern, emotionless man, like
You
And
think that was a protective thing so that he
definitely,
wouldn't like get shot because he said had some
basically.
type of emotion?
And
Wow.
like he wouldn't get pulled over for being disrespectful. And it was like watching him transform again after he, left. And I think the officer did give him a warning. So we were able to move on. And then he, of course, flipped back to his regular self. We were all, I was very young, so we were all confused. We were
Wow, what's going on? Like that
okay,
was
daddy's
something
back. So
there.
I guess we're okay now. We just all stood there like, quiet because it was such a different version. But I learned those things like how you are in front of people, Um, and
Wow.
I don't have a poker face, so sometimes
I
um
I don't, but I just recently got pulled over by the police and I did. I was just like, okay, okay. There was so much I wanted to say, but I
yeah,
can't because I know they write down on the ticket what you say and that
yes,
gets
they
held up in
do.
court. I guess I know too much about this. I get pulled over.
But I think I think on that intersection though, it is like, how can I fully be myself again? What are the ways that society
Mm,
asks me to dim this part of my identity,
you have to think about that a lot.
Yeah. And
That's
there's so many examples that I can share, but I like sometimes I just want to take my friends like, let me take you to a Black study. Let me take you to my family reunion. Let me take you to my spiritual community so you can see some actual, because people just are so transformed in those
mm-hmm,
spaces because they haven't been around Black people in that way. You've only seen me in my work setting. You've only seen me in this one. You haven't seen me with my family,
mm-hmm.
and I feel like that is like for folks who really want authentic relationships with Black people, if you haven't seen their community and
In
been a
their
part of their
element.
lives, you have not reached that level of safety with them, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so like obviously going to a let me get this right, PWI.
Yep.
We are always surrounded by white people in lectures and things like that. That's been my life since starting college. And so when we went to Uganda, not Uganda, it was Rwanda. I was in medical school. I pointed out to them, the white people in my group. I said, "Well, how do y'all feel? Because now y'all the minorities.
And
So go to
what came
Africa."
up? Did they notice that? Was they probably felt uncomfortable at times, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're just like, "Oh, is this how it feels?" Yeah,
And
so getting those cultural experiences are important.
it is. And doing that authentically, like being yourself. I've had, sometimes I've had white folks try to like pretend or talk in a way that they think
So you're
that
saying they should be their authentic self too, right?
yes, be
Yeah.
your authentic self because that's how you form a relationship with somebody. You are interesting. You have things that you like. It's all part of getting to know someone and creating a space. Trying to pretend to
Yeah,
be
we
something
noticed
that you're
that.
not is not going to lead to anything positive.
Exactly. So let's get
Yeah.
over to some coping strategies because, like,
Okay.
being discriminated against, whether your race or whether, because I talked to Jessica actually about racial trauma a few weeks back, probably a couple months ago. But anyhow, whether it's race or because of your gender, what your gender is or your sexual orientation, what are some specific coping strategies or resilience building techniques that can promote mental well-being among Blacks and or LGBT plus? Do you discuss any of that with your
I
residents?
think it, yeah, I think it starts with affirmation. I
Mm-hmm.
tell people this is what I love about your journey to joy. I just love that title so much
Thank
because one
you.
of the questions I ask folks is I say, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? Right? Make a
Wow.
list. Take out your phone, your iPhone or your Android. I don't know what they have on there, but our iPhone, we have notes. Pull up your notes section, type what brings you joy, you know? Make a playlist on your Spotify for when you are, when you need a to be pumped up when you're having a tough time and just go and play it. Don't wait till when you're feeling in such an emotional distress to do this. Do it now. Do
Mm-hmm.
it when you're feeling great. Have it down so then when you have something happen, you can read that list and say, this is who I am. This is
That's
what brings me joy.
exactly what I tell patients.
Yeah, go for a walk. What if it's going for a walk? Telling a joke. Have a list. I have a list of dad jokes because
Ah!
I'm really into those. So I have a little Google website that I'll go and I'll read those like
Oh.
silly little jokes, right? These are all just like I said, strategies to get me from what happened to you, to your office, or to someone who can help and support you. But you're not alone in those moments. And remember that you are resilient and there's a lot to live for and there's a lot to be grateful for. And you have joy in your life because you wrote it down. You have
Oh,
things that
wow.
you
Oh,
like. You
that's so
have
great.
songs that make you move and pump you up because you have that list, and just don't even think about it. Just get to your Spotify, get to your YouTube, whatever, and or start singing it. Because I know some stuff. Start singing the songs out. Do it. Just do what you need to do, and then get to your appointment and establish a regular self-care plan. That could
Yeah.
be having a therapist, that could be taking a class or working
Mhm.
out, that could be doing social things with people, but build in the life that you want. Now there's no time to wait for that. Build in those things and have those mechanisms in place,
Mhm.
right? Because when difficulty comes in, if you've put the structure and built that,
Yeah.
it'll help you,
Yeah,
because
it has to be
no
a
one's trying to
routine.
plan when you're fully in your feelings. No one's got the mental space to be like, now let me figure out what brings me joy.
Exactly, because it's hard to just do that like new thing if you're not
Right.
used to doing it. So if you have an established every day, all day, whatever self-care routine, that is important. That's what I was going to mention, because as you were saying, all those things, these coping strategies, resilience building techniques, that's having self-care. And self-care can look different for everybody. For me, it's running, getting sleep, spending time with my family,
You love to
traveling.
run.
But
You're
I can't
always running.
travel at any
You
moment.
like to exactly.
So I have to have like smaller self-care techniques that I do as well. So
During the pandemic, it was really difficult. At the
hmm
start of the pandemic, my mother passed away,
hmm
and I was doing work remotely. I was like in my house all the time by myself,
mm.
so it was such a difference. I started having lunch at the park. I would just drive to my car and do my work on
Oh,
my phone, and then I would have lunch at the park. Or one day I drove to the coast and I sat and looked at the ocean because I
oh.
like the water, right? So it was
So we
like,
all
so,
need to move to Oregon. That's what it'd be a self-care, huh? Because we
okay,
don't
come
have
on,
oceans in
especially
Atlanta.
right, especially our African American Black friends. We really want you to move to Oregon, but of course, everyone else, please come to. But no, it's really
That's
beautiful.
great.
And it was like, what are you going to do? Like, obviously, I was like, I can't just sit in my house, and I didn't feel comfortable just throwing myself into a social space with COVID and things like that. But it's like, I can go to a park, I can have lunch, I can walk around, right? I need some fresh air, I need to get out of my house, right? So having that that really, it just got me through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm so
And
glad.
figuring out, you can always, and that's the other thing I think about it, is just know how resilient you are, because you got yourself to whatever point you were, you got yourself there. You've been through difficult things before. Keep that in your mind. And if you can't remember it, write it down,
Right.
because this new situation is it's new, but it's no different than other situations that you've made it through, and you can get through that. There's help, there's support, there's
Yeah,
resources.
if you can't
And
do it on your
so
own, that's okay, because you don't have
it's
to do it on
okay.
your own. That's what
You
therapists
don't
are
have
for,
to.
counselors, psychiatrists.
Precisely.
That's
And
all right.
in those rough moments, your biggest job is to figure out what strategies you can get yourself to that meeting. In between when it happens and that meeting, how am I going to make sure I can get myself focused? I can dance my way there. I can read a
Mhm.
book. I can do what brings you joy to get me into that office, right?
Exactly.
Then
Hans
I'm
Zimmer for me. I love that movie score music.
exactly. Oh, he's really good. Like Pan's Labyrinth.
Mhm.
You
Oh
know
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Uh-huh. Love it.
So that's what I would say. The last thing I would say is make sure love is in your vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make
What are
sure
examples
you're
of that?
loving yourself. What do you love about yourself? What do you
Positive
appreciate?
affirmations. I
Positive
talk about
affirmation.
that all the time.
It's
Yeah,
really
and you know
important.
what? Positive affirmations can be like someone's love language, meaning they would love that person who loves them to do that for them. But we need positive affirmations for ourselves as well. We need to say positive things to ourselves.
Exactly. What
Yeah.
I love about being a gay man is how expressive I get to be.
Mhm.
I love music, and like when I go to like a gay club or something, I love all that techno
Well, I
music. I
love that
love
music too. I don't have to be a gay man.
exactly.
I listen to that
But
when I'm running.
But I like that that's a space that has been carved out, and I like that atmosphere, and I like going there and doing that and not feeling like I have to police myself around how to be a man,
Oh,
and how to
wow.
be, and that happens so much. I have some of my cousins, male cousins, that won't smile in photographs. They think that that's going to be gay. You get policed being gay as a
Oh, we
man.
gonna need a part two, Chris, because that's
Yes.
a whole
Oh,
nother thing. Like
this
how
is a
do
whole other topic.
heterosexual men act around homosexual male? Oh, too
Absolutely.
many
Well, that's
topics.
a part two. But just to put a cap on that, like, it's what do you like about your identities, and make sure
Exactly.
you're speaking that into existence.
Love yourself. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you so much for coming on Journey to Joy Live. We would definitely want you to come back. Really appreciate your time, Chris.
Hey, so good to be with you. You take care.